If you look at the back of Hunky Dory, you'll see next to Life on Mars it says inspired by Frankie, referencing the song My Way by Frank Sinatra. But the story of Life on Mars is much weirder than just being inspired by that song. It was 1967, and David Bowie's publishing office received a tape of Comme d'habitude, the original French version of My Way. Bowie's publisher was in the office and was asked if he knew someone who could write English lyrics to the French song, and he suggested a young David Bowie. Bowie did in fact provide the first English lyrics, and wrote a song he called Even a Fool Learns to Love. If you listen carefully to the demo he recorded, you can hear the French lyrics underneath.
There was a time, the laughing time, he took his heart to every party.
David Bowie hadn't yet had the commercial breakthrough we all know about today, and so in the early part of his career, it would have been a really big deal to have written this song.
And when you hear the demo versions of this that Bowie recorded, simply by singing over the original French recording of it, you can hear a real passion in his voice. There's a palpable sense that Bowie really wanted this gig.
So yes, David Bowie was the first person to write an English version of what would become My Way. But in the end, the French publisher rejected Bowie's version, and instead the rights to the song went to Paul Anka, who wrote the lyrics to My Way that we all know about today.
Well, I thought I'd make a few bob out of it, but I didn't. Next thing I heard, it had been done, rewritten again by Paul Anka, and it came back as My Way, and Sinatra had done it.
My Way then of course took on a life of its own, becoming Frank Sinatra's signature song, reviving his career and providing him with a legacy that still stands today.
I was really pissed off. I thought, oh, it should have been my song, you know? So I thought, okay, I'll write my own version. So it's My Way on Mars.
But let's not get ahead of ourselves. In 1967, David Bowie was still a relatively unknown figure. His debut album came out that year, which was considered by many to be a commercial failure because the record label failed to promote it. And his follow-up album, released 2 years later, despite being musically inventive, suffered the same problem with promotion. But what these early years did give him was this freedom to experiment creatively. One of the interesting things about Bowie was that he wasn't determined to focus solely on the commercial success of his own records.
Kind of trying to be a songwriter, not even a singer particularly, but I was quite happy to write them songs, and they would give these songs to different artists. That was the idea anyway. Nothing ever came of it.
But it was during a trip to North America that he became inspired to get back in the studio and to write what would be his fourth album, Hunky Dory.
Which then convinced me that I should get back to what I really like doing, which is being theatrical on stage, but putting on a show. I started to try it all over again, and I formed a little band, and I started writing different kinds of numbers.
This trip to North America not only inspired some strange lyrics, but also a new stripped-back style of music. And so, in 1971, David Bowie began writing Life on Mars and recorded a demo of the song with him on piano.
It's a simple but small affair to the girl with the mousy hair, but her mother is yelling no, and her father has asked her to go.
This demo was recorded in the spring of 1971, 4 years after the experience with My Way, and just a few months before Hunky Dory was recorded later that summer. Many of the elements are clearly inspired by My Way. For example, the opening chord progression is exactly the same. When it came to recording the album, Bowie chose to work with some familiar musicians, most notably, in the case of Life on Mars, Rick Wakeman on piano.
When we came to do Hunky Dory, that was really fascinating because he called me up and said, come around the house, I want to play you some songs. So I went round to his house. He had a beautiful grand piano, and he put a lot of music manuscript paper on there and some pencils and things. He said, I'm going to play some songs, make some notes. And he played me Life on Mars. And I said, you know what, David, that's one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard. He said, have you made notes on it? I said, yeah. He said, play it through. I said, well, how would you like me to play it? He said, well, you know how I want you to play it. I said, I've done, that's why I'm asking you. He said, just play it. So I played it. He said, that's how I want it.
But as Rick would later say, it was the song itself that made it so special.
It had every single ingredient. I mean, the great thing about David was he was a wonderful melody man, but it wasn't just the melodies. He had great ideas for chord structures and would always throw in the odd surprise when you were least expecting it. And that's what was so great about playing his stuff. He'd be teaching you a song and you'd be going along, and then suddenly you'd think, oh, I know how this is going to go, and then it would change. Very clever guy.
Actually, later on in this interview, Rick Wakeman plays a solo arrangement of the song, and I think it highlights just how beautiful Bowie's melodic and harmonic writing was, perhaps even more so than the original song. As well as Rick's beautiful piano playing, the song also contains some other special ingredients. There's a string quartet, perfectly arranged for the song, and a wonderful recorder line as well.
Their recorders are used so infrequently, and they just fit in so perfectly with everything else on this.
And at the very end, just as the piano fades out, we can hear this telephone ringing in the background. This wasn't actually intended to be there, but was instead the result of a weird accident. Ken Scott, the song's producer and engineer, explains what happened.
It was going great. This was going to be the one. But unfortunately, right by the side of the piano, there was a toilet, and in that toilet was a public phone. Someone got a wrong number and called in halfway through that great take, and we had to stop it. And Ronno was cursing and swearing about it. I then rolled back to the beginning of the tape and started to record again. We got the master, finally. It wasn't until we put the strings on, and they're sustaining at the end, so they go longer than we'd ever really listened before. And as they're going, we suddenly hear this piano come back in, and then we hear the phone ring and Ronno swearing. We've got to keep this is just too good. Of course, I had to pull it out really fast because the Beeb would never play what Ronno was saying.
What? That's why. Fucking bastard. Oh, for fuck's sake.
By the way, if you made it this far, please take a moment to subscribe. One key element that was consistent with Bowie's recording process was spontaneity.
I co-produced 4 albums with him, and 95% of the vocals that I did with him were first take, beginning to end. I would get the level, I'd start the tape rolling in record, and what he did that one performance is what you still hear today.
In fact, those string arrangements, which you might expect to be written out by some expert orchestrator, were actually written by Mick Ronson, also known as Ronno, who Bowie believed would be able to do the job.
David said, "Oh, Mick does that, he'll do that." I'd never done it before in my life, So I wrote some string arrangements.
Although the song is now one of Bowie's most well-known songs, it wasn't originally released as a single. Instead, it was just part of the album, Hunky Dory, an album which, like some of his earlier work, at first wasn't so well received.
There was a certain amount of disappointment because this didn't do very well at all when it first came out. Yeah, it was just, okay, we did what we wanted to do, it was great, so other people don't get it, that's fine.
It was only when Ziggy Stardust came along did Hunky Dory start to see some traction. And when Bowie toured in following years at the height of Ziggy Stardust, Life on Mars soon became one of the most popular songs on tour. As a result, 2 years later in 1973, RCA Records decided to release Life on Mars as a single. Bowie shot a promotional video for the song, a simple video with him wearing heavy makeup and a turquoise suit.
I love the way he filmed that. It was so bizarre. I'd had no idea he was going to do that. He was going to burn everything out like that. And it was just remarkable. I mean, it's a strange piece of film, but it's quite beautiful.
But there's one more thing. This whole story started as a disappointment. Bowie's song was turned down in favour of My Way, which inspired him to write something similar, Life on Mars. But the legacy of these two songs is very different. My Way became a song Frank Sinatra ended up disliking, unable to shake his association with it, feeling it was self-indulgent and self-serving, and that he was forced to sing it everywhere he went. Life on Mars, well, it's just another great song within Bowie's catalogue, and respect and love of the song has just continued to grow over time.
He's never made another album that's ever sounded like Hunky Dory, and he's never ever tried to write another track that sounds like Life on Mars.